Hi, this is David Orlofsky. Welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Whether you watch it with our friends over at Tony Time, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts, as always, we're happy to have you along. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I think also comment. Comment, like, share, subscribe, comment. And as we mentioned last time, we are now on 24/6. So if that's your platform of choice, well, we're there too. And we have a sponsor this week. And I have to tell you that I was so moved by this sponsorship that I'm going to use this as the theme for the entire episode. What do you think about that? Hi, I'm a Mesivta Bachur who really enjoys your show. Now, you understand, for those of you who don't come from that world, that's like high school. This is a high school kid who dug into his piggy bank and took out the money to be able to sponsor an episode for the tens of thousands of people who watch the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. What was his motivation? After making your matzah brai recipe, I realized I need to sponsor an episode. Now, I have to tell you something. It's my dad's recipe. Yeah. It really is very good. In fact, there was one Motzi Shabbos when me and my wife were going to sit down to Melava Malka, and we didn't have a piece of bread left in the house. But we had matzah. I made a matzah brai, and boy, I forgot how good it is. Remember, matzah brai is not just for Pesach. Yeah. So this is to thank you for your positive influence in so many people's lives. You should be Zoche to health, wealth, and the time to enjoy it. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that expression is before you were alive. Because they used to be on this radio station, WEVD, Art Raymond Simcha. And he used to end it with health, wealth, and the time to enjoy it. I think that's how he used to end it. So Yasha Kayach for that. I want to speak first about the second half that you mentioned. You know, a chazan gets up by Musaf, and he says a special tefillah hineni, yeah, and we daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he should give us the ability to daven well. And I say, you know, the guy's got the sitter right in front of him. The tunes were written for him already. He has to just make sure he doesn't mess up. You know who really needs a hineni? A speaker. A speaker. Because you're getting up to speak, and you have the opportunity to change people's lives. Now, I have to tell you that I think the largest live audience I ever spoke to was the Shmeres Haloshen event in Yerushalayim. I think there's like 3,000 women. That's probably the largest live event I've ever spoken at. I can't even imagine what it would be like to speak to 10,000 people. We were in a stadium, an arena. I can't even imagine it, you know. Although I did make a 2-second appearance in a video in the Siyum Shas because I give a Daf Yomi. So there was like a Tuesday when they were doing Daf Yomis around the world. If you watch quickly and you have to maybe slow it down, you know, somebody got a screenshot of it and sent it to me, you know, there I am. So, so maybe that was the largest audience that I ever appeared in front of. But to be able to have this podcast and be able to speak to so many people, and listen, I'm sitting here in my living room in front of a camera talking. And by the way, I make it look much easier than it is. You know this sometimes because sometimes I have guests on who have never been on this kind of a forum, and they just like freeze up, you know? My son, when he came on the first time with his friends from Waterbury, they realized afterwards they were too stiff and stilted. That's because it's not that easy to make this happen. The second time they came on, they said they rehearsed and they practiced and they had some questions that they wanted me to ask them. It's not that easy. Yeah. So, but to me, I'm talking to you. That's how I'm talking to you. I'm just looking. I'm coming into your home and into your life, or into your car, or wherever you are, wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts. I'm coming to that, and I'm able to do this. I'm able to picture it. I do this when I speak, even if I have hundreds of people in the audience. I'm talking to one person, and I view myself as speaking to that one person. And interestingly enough, I always look for the hardest person. Now, because I have ADD, I can see everybody at the same time, but I was speaking at a evening. It was a Thursday night. The Friday night, I got my heart attack. So I was already not in the best of shape. But I was speaking with 3 other major speakers, very, very well-known speakers. And I was sitting in the back of the room watching. And there was this one guy on his laptop the whole time. And I said, he's my audience. And I got up to speak, and I kept watching him. He didn't go to his laptop once. At the end, everybody came over to give me yashikayach, and he says, wow, thank you. That was so much. And that was so good. And I said, you were my whole audience. He says, I was watching you because I saw you on your laptop. Because no, I had to check something. I said, if I could be interestingly enough that you don't go to your laptop, then I know I did something good, And then I had a heart attack. But because I give my life for my people. Anyway, the point is that you have to say Hineni, because I have met dozens of people. I've gotten many other emails, but I've met dozens of people who told me something that I said literally changed their life. Literally, not figuratively, literally. And that's very heavy. If I ever stopped to think about that, I wouldn't be able to speak, because it's all on you. I think it was HBO was giving out awards to like these comedians who had done specials, And Seinfeld said, the only one who deserves an award is a comedian. It says, because an actor, somebody wrote his lines. There's the BBC did this television show called Sherlock, where they took Sherlock Holmes and they put him in modern times. Benedict Cumberbatch plays Sherlock Holmes. And he's brilliant, obviously. And somebody asked him in an interview once, how do you come up with all these brilliant ideas? He says, they're written for me. He says, somebody wrote their lines, and then the director tells him where to stand, how to say it, what to look like. It directs him on every part, and then we give him an award. The man's a genius. He says, comedian, we got to write our own material. We have to get up in front of the crowd. We have to speak to the people. We have to, the whole onus is on us. Achas kama v'kama by a speaker. And if you're a comedian and you didn't go over so well, okay, you bombed, you didn't do so good that night, But if you get up to speak, you are bearing in mind the fact that if I'm effective, I'm going to change people's lives. So the fact that I say things that people find meaningful and adds to their life, I've talked about this in the past, I got an email once from a fellow who said he was burnt by the yeshiva system. He does not learn. He doesn't go to any shiurim. The only thing he listens to is my podcast. And other people have told me. I get emails from women who are like, my husband was abusive and, he finally left me. I've got 3 little kids. We don't have any money. Your podcast carries me through the day. And I've had people call me up who lost children, who have illnesses and things. Because your podcast carries me through, I had a fellow who I knew in the neighborhood who passed away after a long illness. And his wife said, he was so sick, it was impossible for him to learn, but he would listen to your podcast. That's what gave him the chiyas. I told you this, Rabbi Alta, Zeichet Tzadik Lebracha, I will say. When I went to visit him in the hospital, he was al hasaf at that particular moment, holding on to life. And I went in to see him, and he grabs me by the hand and says, "Where's the podcast?" That was during the Tekufa when we weren't doing the podcast. Where's the podcast? I'm waiting for the podcast. So when you say that, you get chizik from it and that, it adds to people, you should know that I take it very seriously. I say a hineni when I get up to speak. I've spoken on a number of occasions with Rabbi Zev Leff from Moshe Matazyahu. He always walks up first and he takes a hold of the paroches and he says the tefillah, he kisses the paroches, and then he gets up to speak. Rabbi Orlofsky said before he gets up to speak, or before he starts teaching, taking a teaching position, etc., he always davens for hatzlacha first, because the consequences are so tremendously dramatic of what you can do if you find the right words at the right place, right? As I don't know who said it, but I heard it from Faisal Krohn. I remember he was quoting somebody. I can't remember. It says, Mazel is makom zman lashon. If you say the right thing in the right place, the right time, you got mazel. So thank you so much for your support and everybody who's gaining from this. But it's the first part that I wanted to focus on, and that is the matzah brei. The Rabbi Orlofsky show is not your average. It's not your average shir. We have merch. I'm going to start selling these things, and you almost never see your average Rosh Hashiva after he gives a shir, like selling T-shirts and mugs and things like that. These are actually made by participants, people who follow the show, So I'm thinking of having merch, and I'm thinking, I don't know, does a rabbi have merch? There's a certain, I always pictured at the Siyam Hashas in the stadium, 50,000 people dressed in black doing the wave, I think that would be the coolest thing. But if you go all the way back to the first season, I had an episode called "It's a Show, Not a Shir." I call it the Rabbi Orlofsky Show, and some people are like, "Nah, it's a shir," So I said, "No, it's not. It's a show, because I'll have on musical guests, I'll talk about things in politics. Sometimes I'll do a straightforward shir, and sometimes I start giving out recipes. And it's amazing the reaction I've gotten from that." There was a young Sephardi married woman who wrote to me and said, the Sephardim, everything's a pachka. They don't know how to do anything simple, It's a pachka. Because, so I'm going to school and I'm working, and then I come home and I have to make supper for my husband. I didn't know you could cook easy. I didn't know it was possible. And I started using your recipes, and my husband says, "Oh, this is really delicious." And it changed my life. In fact, I have a chukka. I have to figure out how to do it. Our producer, Yisrael, says he's going to try to work it out somehow, that we can set up a little table here, and there's certain things I need to demonstrate. I can't, I could tell you how to do it, but you need to see it. L'dugma, I use my mother's stuffed cabbage recipe. But between me and you, she didn't really know how to roll the stuffed cabbage. It was delicious, but she would put the filling in, roll it up, and then stick in 8 gigantic toothpicks to hold it together. So I've been working on this. I make stuffed cabbage, or as my wife likes to call them, chalupchas. I didn't grow up with chalupchas. The first time my wife said to me chalupchas, I was like, oh my gosh, what's that? You understand? I grew up with stuffed durma. I never even heard kishke. My mother would make a noodle pudding instead of a kugel. You know, it's like I had to learn to speak the lingo. You know, but so chalupchas. So I make them before Purim. I make them before Hoshana Rabbah. These are the times for this. I make them for Purim. Those are the three. Kreplach and chalupchas are eaten during those times because they're all things where it's hidden. Same thing with kreplach, where the filling is hidden. That's why they happen in those particular occasions. But I've really worked on how to roll the chalupchas so that they stay together, and I have to really show you. I can't. You know. So we'll have to see how we're going to put it together. You know. There's a comedian, Brian Regan. He says, I watch cooking shows, but they're not really very realistic. He goes, I would have no problem cooking if I walked into the kitchen and there were little bowls with everything already prepared and I just had to dump them in. You know, I'll dump this in and dump that in and this. Wow, that was unbelievable. He goes, and then you put it in the oven and you open up the bottom oven and there's one already there. Hey, did you know there was one here already? Why did we make another one? Look, it's all done already. I'm going to make a realistic cooking show. He goes, okay, now we're going to pour this for 25 minutes while I go to the store and buy eggs. I started cooking and I didn't realize I don't have any eggs. Anyway, so I would give the recipes. For the most part, my mother's recipes, which as I always pointed out, are designed to be good and easy as possible. I was going to put them out as a cookbook, but I realized you could probably just go around to all the different different podcasts I've done and pull out the recipes themselves. But there might be an advantage to putting it out in a book so you have it in front of you and you know where it is. And if I ever put out a cookbook, I would put it out the same way I would put out my Haggadah if I ever put out a Haggadah, which is a spiral. You know how hard it is to try to have a Haggadah where you're like, sticking it under the chair, under the plate and leaning your fork on the other side and it starts to roll up and you drink the wine and spill it all over. A spiral. Laminated pages is the way to do it. So if I ever do my Haggadah, my nephew put out Rabbi Wine's Haggadah, and it's called the Orlofsky Haggadah. And people say, oh, I saw your Haggadah. And I said, no, you did not. You saw Rabbi Wine's Haggadah. It's called the Orlofsky Haggadah. Anyway, but so the idea of giving them different recipes, I want to try to give it a philosophical bend if I can. That's what I wanted to talk about. Talk about food, my favorite topic. Now, I know I've talked about this in the past, and I know I've talked about it piecemeal. I don't know if I ever went Kaseder philosophically. So some of this might be repetitious because I meet people. You know who you are. And they recite back to me everything I have ever said. Somebody came once to watch a filming, because you can be part of the studio audience. I did a whole podcast and he said, you didn't say one thing I haven't heard already. I said, okay, well, it's a little hard to do this for years and years and not repeat yourself. Yeah. So it could be a number of these ideas I've said already, etc. So I want to start with a story that was a dramatic story. Dramati. That's a Hebrew word, by the way, for those of you who don't speak Hebrew. Often dramati. I was doing an encounter conference in Cape Town, South Africa. Haven't been to South Africa in a long time. Don't know if they'll arrest me as a war criminal at this point, but I was in. I go to Joburg, and I go to Cape Town, and the Jewish school there in Cape Town was doing a. They were doing a encounter conference. It was like you call it a Shabbaton. It wasn't a Shabbaton. It wasn't on Shabbos. It was during the week. Convention. I don't know what would be the term for it. They bring in a whole bunch of rabbis because the amount of Limudei Kodesh in this school is minimal. I remember one time when I spoke in JFS school in London, I said to the headmaster, what can I talk about? He goes, well, basically anything that God gave Moses on Mount Sinai, we don't teach here. He says, so you got lots of options. You don't have to worry about repeating anything. So I go to this encounter conference. Now, in South Africa and in Australia, they have to take non-Jewish students if they want to go to the school. Now, they obviously discourage them because they are going to be doing Jewish studies and things like that. But, for example, in Australia, the level of the Jewish schools are of such a high caliber that particularly the kids from China, and they had the one-child policy, so they send their kids to Australia. They want them to have the finest education, and they go to the Jewish school, and they're exempted from the Jewish classes. It was interesting. I was speaking to the group. I did my standard "Why be Jewish?" and there were two Chinese kids there. I was a little surprised. And I said, this is why be Jewish? And they're like Chinese, So he says, they go to all the Limudei Kodesh classes. They find them fascinating. So they don't have to. They're exempt, but they come. So in South Africa, there were some non-Jewish kids, but particularly there was this one Catholic teacher who was teaching there. And she sent her daughter to the school. And she was friendly with all the Jewish kids. And, Now, I have a whole different story about her, which I'll tell perhaps one time. But what they did is they made a forum. And they took the Catholic teacher. And they took a Muslim teacher. And they took me and a secular Jewish teacher to answer questions on religion. And it was interesting. I have a couple of different stories about that. But at one point, one of the kids asked the Muslim teacher, being a Muslim teacher in a Jewish school, have you ever had any unpleasant experiences? And she said, yes, I did. Says a girl came over and offered me something to eat. And I said, I can't, I'm fasting. And she said, but you were fasting last week. And she said, yes, last week and this week. And for an entire month, it's Ramadan, and we fast during all of Ramadan. And the girl said, that's the craziest thing I ever heard. And I was so hurt that a Jewish girl couldn't respect somebody else's religion. Well, you can imagine the tension in the room at that moment. So I had to do something, I said, I would like to say something in this young lady's defense. I don't think she was attacking your religion. It's just a Jew cannot conceive the concept of fasting for an entire month. We fast one day, and people are going out of their mind. The whole time, people were just asking, when's it over? When's it over? When does the fast finish? When does it go? When is that? We Jews eat. And that's why I would point out that every Jewish holiday is associated with a food. And you can play along at home. Rosh Hashanah, apple and honey. And there's a reason why we use an apple instead of another fruit. And there's a reason that we use honey instead of sugar, right? There's reasons. Shavuos, No, cheesecake. Pesach, matzah. Yeah. Even the people who don't eat gebrachs, they at least eat matzah, Otherwise, I would say knedlach, and matzah brei. But okay, but at least matzah, yeah. Sukkos. So a lot of people have cabbage soup. Yeah, it's often a traditional Sukkos dish, And I remember I was going down the list, and I at Purim, it's the Hamantash. Yeah, Chanukah is latkes, and I would go Tisha B'av, and almost without hesitating, people say, the egg with the ashes. I said, even on a fast day, we have a food that's associated with it, because we Jews understand that food and eating food is a way for us to be able to fill what we eat with meaning. And therefore, whatever we're eating has significance to it. I found at least 3 or 4 places in the Chassam Sofer where he mentions different types of food that they would eat different times in different places. I had this once in a question and answer. Somebody asked me, why do we eat gefilte fish? I said, gefilte fish was there because of borer. It's a big problem of taking the bones out of the fish. And so if you serve a piece of fish and it's got bones in it and people pull out the bones, you over borer. So what they would do is they would take out the fish and they would remove all of the bones and they would fill it with, some stuff and then stuff it back into the fish and then boil up the fish. And you get a slice of fish and the middle would have this sort of fish. I've never seen it in America. Here in Eretz Yisrael, you can still see it. You can go to a real, from takeout place and buy slices of carp with the gefilte fish in the middle. Yeah, which to me is a big thrill. But at some point, someone realized, I don't have to stuff this back in the fish. I can make them into little balls and boil them like knedlach. And that's where gefilte fish comes from. But there's a reason that we eat it. There's a reason why the challah is braided. There's a purpose to it and not just a regular type of a bread. Everything that has, special foods to it have significance to it. I mentioned already about the kreplach and challah. There's a reason why we do these things. There's meaning behind it. So that when you eat food, there's a lot of different considerations that go into it. Taste is one. You want something that's tasty, 100%. In addition to that, the food should ideally be healthy. Oh boy, I was giving an intro shir to and or Sameach. I was talking about the relationship between mind, body, and soul, and taking care of your body as well. And there was a retired professor from Harvard, and he goes, yeah, I can't understand these Jews. They eat all this unhealthy stuff. And he starts in on kishka and on chopped liver, and on this and then, and I was like, oh my gosh, someone stop this man. He's destroying the foundation of all Judaism, And, he went on. It was really quite a condemnation of the frum diet, And I just said to myself, I'm so glad he's never heard of gribbinus. Gribbinus is basically like chicken skin that you cook in chicken fat until it absorbs all the chicken fat and becomes crispy. And you don't even need to eat it. Just stick it right inside of your arteries. There's, a much more efficient method for that, and just wait to die. Anyway, so it's so funny. Jackie Mason did a whole routine on food where he says, if something's healthy now, it won't be healthy in 5 years, Now they tell you eggs is the worst thing for you. Cholesterol, it's terrible, So when you're growing up, your mother used to say, don't eat junk, eat an egg, eat something substantial. Turns out your own mother was trying to kill you. You sit down to have a cup of coffee. He says, well, the coffee is a carcinogenic, so you're going to get cancer, And then the milk, has cholesterol, it'll kill you from a heart attack, And then the sugar, it'll give you diabetes, and you'll die from that. So you're dying 3 ways, and you haven't even had a piece of cake. Just a cup of coffee. He said, not only that, the caffeine will kill you up. So not only will keep you awake, so not only will you die, you'll watch yourself go. But it's definitely true that, there was a time when they told you coffee was no good for you. And now they've come around to the fact that coffee is good for you. Again, I apologize for the secular reference, but there was a Woody Allen movie called Sleeper where he's frozen and he wakes up like 200 years later. They defrost him, He's wrapped in aluminum foil. They stick him in the freezer. And he used to run a health food store. And as they're defrosting him and they're like trying to, for him to wake up and adjust. So all the doctors are sitting there smoking cigarettes, And he's like, what did this guy do? He says, he used to run a health food store. He says, what's that? He goes, that was back in the old days when people thought that like smoking and, and meat and eggs and these things were bad for you. He goes, wow. It's like the Middle Ages. He goes, yeah, I can imagine that. So the fact is that the food that we eat usually has meaning behind it. And so when you eat, it's very interesting, the Mesilas Yesharim, after he finishes the baseline of what you need to become a tzaddik, he talks about becoming a chassid. And to become a chassid, he says, the first step is precious, which means only take from the world what you need. Now, don't deprive yourself of what you need, but only take what you need, which means, as we all know, you could be sitting at the table on a Friday night and take more than you need. Yeah. You take another portion of this. You take another portion of that. Why? Because it's delicious. It's yummy. Yeah. I make roast chicken and potatoes. Yeah. I'll give you a recipe. I haven't had a recipe in a while. Yeah. I cut the potatoes, not into small pieces, into pretty big pieces. And I rub them in oil, salt, pepper, garlic, and paprika. And I lay them on the bottom of the pan. And then I put the pieces of chicken into that, and I mix it up too, and I put it on top. And you cook it for a very long time. I don't think this is the best piece of chicken you'll have, but the potatoes are to die for. They are so delicious. And you could just keep eating them. Yeah. I don't, because I know it'll make me sick. But, you eat them Friday night and you're like, oh my gosh, it's the most delicious thing I've ever had. It's like, it's so good. Very simple, right? Obviously, that's the Rabbi Orlofsky method, as my mother used to say, it's easy, stupid, you know what I mean? That's how you make them. And they just come out so delicious. You just can't believe it, and you could just sit there and eat a bowl of it, but you'll be sick, So you take one potato, you take this, you take a little of everything, put it on your plate, and you don't have to go back for more, even though it was delicious, even though it was very yummy, So only take what you need. That's the first step. The second step is called tahara, where he says, even what you take should be with the right intentions. Because you could say, I'm only going to take a little bit, and eat it like the Cookie Monster, you know what I mean? I may have mentioned this at one point. I remember reading this. Someone did a study, I think it was all the way back in the 1930s. And it has been confirmed by research many times. You could solve most of your health issues if you chew your food until it's liquid before you swallow it. Just keep chewing it, and it takes off a tremendous amount of pressure on your digestive system. It makes it easier for you to get the nutrients, all kinds of wonderful things. And I've read studies since, and this has been borne out by research over the years. So somebody was watching a kid in like a McDonald's eat a hamburger. And he says, I think he ate the whole burger in 3 bites. And he goes, I don't even know if he chewed it. I think he just swallowed it whole. He says, that's terrible for you from a health point of view. I mean, even if you don't chew it to its literal, at least. But people just jump in, just, yeah. So even what you eat should be with kavanah. And I point this out to people. I happen to enjoy very much clementinas, oranges. Yeah. You peel a clementina, and clementina is a kind of a fruit that if you have a good peel, you can peel it easily. You could just eat like 6 of them without even realizing it. So when you peel the clementina, stop, look at it, smell it, take it in, take off a section, put it in your mouth, enjoy it, taste it, chew it up, take the next one, as opposed to just scarfing it down. I don't know if this has happened to anybody else. It's happened to me. You make yourself a cup of coffee, and at some point you look at the cup, and it's empty, and you don't remember having drunk it. And you say, well, I must have drunk it because it's empty, but I don't even remember having it, Anyway, but if you don't learn to enjoy things, that means that when you eat it, it should be with the correct intentions. I told this story, I'm sure. A friend of mine was in the takeout place, and this fellow's buying everything that's there. And he goes, oh, that looks good. Let me taste that. All right, I'll give me 2 pounds of that. L'chvoid Shabbos Kodesh. That? Oh, L'chvoid Shabbos Kodesh. And my friend, he says, I didn't say anything to him, but I wanted to say, who are you kidding? This has nothing to do with Shabbos. This is l'chvoid your taivas. You just want to give in to your taivas. And when a person sits down and looks, how can I make this food so that it's appetizing and it's nice and it helps me for my avodas Hashem? And that's what Shabbos is for. Shabbos is a din of oneg. So the presentation is important. I may have mentioned this. But the reason for Shabbos candles is so that you can see your food. Because if you don't see the food, you don't enjoy it. That's one of the reasons it says a blind person is like he's dead, because he doesn't enjoy it. And that's what the people were complaining about the mun. It says, oh, we remember this and this and this and this that we used to eat in Mitzrayim. But the mun could taste like anything you want. Yeah, but it doesn't look like it. I remember that Pepsi made this drink called Pepsi Clear. It looked like seltzer. And you poured it and tasted exactly like Pepsi. And nobody wanted it. Because Pepsi's supposed to taste like Pepsi. For years, bubblegum was pink. And the reason bubblegum was pink was because when the person who invented bubblegum, the only coloring they had in the factory was pink. So he made it pink. And after that, it was minhag ha'olam that bubblegum has to be pink. Yeah. And if you took the regular coloring out of cola, it would look like a light green. But people have an idea of what things should look like. I remember there was at the Kufa when they were making purple ketchup and green ketchup. Nobody wanted it. You have an idea of what something is supposed to look like. So when you spend time making a presentation, it changes the nature of the food. When I may have told this story. When I was running NCSY, so the local shul would provide the paper goods. So usually they said, listen, you pick it up and give us a bill. So we were frugal. Yeah. We were frugal. We were thrifty. Whenever I say that, my son Yaakov says, you mean cheap? I said, I prefer to use the term frugal. So we would buy the cheapest paper goods, you'd put down one of those tablecloths that look like a garbage bag, a white garbage bag, and we'd get the white paper plates that they used to use for barbecues, and the cheapest white plastic and the white, napkins that come 500 for like 29 cents, one of those big bags, Yeah. And we kept it very simple. So one time we're doing it in a shul that had a catering hall. And they said, look, we have dishes in the catering hall and we have the staff here anyway, so we'll serve it on dishes. We served the same food that we served every other Shabbos. We ran out of it in like the first 15 minutes. It was the same food we always served, but now instead of being on a white paper plate, it was on a real dish. And everyone says, wow, this is choshev. Everybody ate it right away. Presentation goes a long way to people enjoying it. So on Shabbos, we make that effort, not just to put out the food, but to put it out in a way, Okay, now, I don't know what these people are thinking. I really don't. But if you read these Jewish magazines, and I've made it clear already, my wife gets all of them, and I go right away to the recipe section, mostly to laugh. I just laugh. I said, why would anyone in their right mind do these things? It's so complicated and unnecessary, and I can't believe it produces anything better than what I have, But then they show you how to set the table. Get these kind of dishes, get these kind of things. Do people really do that? Do people go out and buy a new set of dishes and napkins and and they're like this just for this meal? Oh, you Rockefeller? As my father used to say. Not that anybody knows what that means today, Who are you, Bill Gates? Who are you? You can't even use that because Rockefeller, at least he was an usher who lived like an usher, So Bill Gates, he dresses like he's, moving furniture, works in a fruit store, forget about, what's his name down in Nebraska. I don't remember. Anyway, but he goes out to a diner, has a hamburger every day. He's like 90. He's worth billions of dollars. He's a hamburger in the diner. His daughter says he won't buy a new car unless he can buy it at a discount because it has hail damage. When the car's outside, there's a hailstone. There's little pings in the car. He says, it's a brand new car, so it's got hail damage. Why should I pay more for it? That's not called an usher. You don't understand what it means, The Rockefeller was an usher, So that's why my father would always say, well, who am I, Rockefeller, So if you in Judaism, the Kufa, everyone would say Rothschild. What am I, a Rothschild? That was a symbol of absolute wealth and living that type of a lifestyle. But we're mechabed Shabbos and Yantif by presenting it in a way that's pleasing to the eye, and to each their own. Some people will put down a little doily on the plate. Some people will, use it, whatever it is, to make it more appetizing, so that you're mechabed the food that you're eating. Isaac Bashevis Singer, his father was a Rav. Today they would say like a Rav Shchuna, someplace in Warsaw. And he wrote a book called In My Father's Court, where he just shares different stories of growing up with a father who was a Rav. It's probably the most interesting thing he ever wrote. But he tells a story about his father had a case where these two families, they were supposed to make a shidduch and they got into a fight, whatever was going on. And so one of them sent them for Purim, shalach manos with hamantashen with animal manure inside of it. Well, imagine a scandal this is. You send this to somebody for shalach manos, and, it was, they were at each other's throat. It was terrible. And they come to the Rav and each one with a complaint. And he looks at them and he says, do you know what food is? And he goes through. So the farmer has to go out there and he has to plow and he has to plant and he has to water the fields and he has to weed it and then he has to harvest it and then he has to thresh it and he has to winnow it and he has to grind it. Then he goes to have a piece of bread. He goes, and you know what it was like when people didn't have a piece of bread? People wouldn't have a piece of bread to eat. And he goes, and you took dough and did this to it? He says, everybody in the room was just like devastated. Yeah, food. And you watch how people just like throw things away. My father grew up during the Depression. He always used to say the worst thing in the world is to waste food, But I see my grandchildren, they'll take an apple, take 2 bites out of it and leave it on the counter, It kills me, I scrape a melon until it's mamish, I'm down to the peel. My mother used to make melon balls. Sometimes I make melon balls, on special occasions. And then I scoop out all the rest of the melon. I eat that. I don't need them in little bowl shapes, It's still good melon. You throw it away, My father would crack an egg, and then with his finger pull out from the shell. I do that, open up the little aluminum foil on the cottage cheese and scrape off what was attached to it on top, I do that too. There's a sense of being mechabed food. Food is something important. So in general, we have to be mechabed it. We can't waste it. We have to treat it with respect. And on top of that, we should, have, especially on Shabbos and Yontif, the foods that we eat are significant, and we should treat them with that respect that they deserve. And that was all in response to the sponsorship for my matzah brei recipe, which is really my dad's. Okay. And that brings us to the question and answer portion. By Anonymous, what are your thoughts on alternative medicine? So, yesh kama sugim when you talk about alternative medicine. One is that there's no question that Western medicine does not take a holistic approach. It deals with a problem. This hurts you, take this pill. This hurts you, take that pill. This is a problem, cut them open. This is a problem, take this out. My daughter was having digestive problems and was having a lot of pain. We weren't sure if it was the appendix. What it was? It turned out it was irritable bowel syndrome, And they finally let her out of the hospital. But the surgeon says, I don't really like to let people go without cutting them open. So that's very interventionist. A lot of problems can be solved with diet. A lot of problems can be solved with different things, etc., and different methodologies. I cannot tell you the effectiveness of all of them. I don't know. Yeah. There are certain people who swear by reflexology. There are certain people who swear by all kinds of other different methods. I don't know. It's not my area of expertise. But I will tell you the one thing that I think is total nonsense, and that is energy healing. These are the people who supposedly have energy in their body, and they go over you and they cure it. And there was a woman here in Har Nof, and she used to do energy healing. And someone said, what do you think about it? And I said, I think it's total nonsense. But didn't your daughter go? Says, yeah. She had terrible migraines. We kept upping the medicine. She went to her and he cured her migraines. Because I thought you don't believe in it. He says, I don't, but it works. So what am I going to tell you? I can't explain it. Maybe it's just Kadosh Baruch Hu used that to cover up a nace. I don't know. But, but Al Pi Svara, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like I knew this very, very Litvisha guy. He didn't hold from Hasidus at all. Except the Ger Rebbe, because he couldn't have children. And he went to the Ger Rebbe, gave him a bracha, and they had a child. So he says, I thought you don't believe in Rebbes. He goes, I don't, but what can I do? It worked. So as far as treating things with diet, with other methodology, do I think there's a lot of wisdom that Western science chose not to pay attention to? Sure. I'll give you a simple example from my own life, and I'm sure I spoke about this already. It says in Taimim and Hagim that if you have hepatitis, you put a pigeon on your belly button, and the pigeon dies, and it takes out the hepatitis. So I had hepatitis, and Rabbi Orlofsky, in fact, he was my Bekias Rebbe. He bullied me into doing the pigeons. I killed 8 pigeons. The guy later said I could have killed a whole flock. And all the doctors say it's nonsense. It's nonsense. But I can tell you that my SGOTs, my SGTPs, which are supposed to be about 50, were up to 2,000. And my next blood test, it was down to 200. Now, scientifically, I should have checked before the pigeons and after the pigeons, but it was the same week. It was still, the doctor said it was a remarkable recovery. But I heard later they actually did a study on this, and they autopsied the pigeons and found that their livers were saturated with hepatitis. It somehow pulls it out into the bird's liver, which means that we knew something that they didn't know. And, so when you talk about other alternative healing processes, definitely there's wisdom to them. And like I say, I'm not an expert on this, but it definitely has its place. By Anonymous, what is the best way to praise someone that is doing something good without making them feel awkward and stop wanting to do what they are doing? My rule of thumb is less is more. When you have these people who are over the top, wow, that was so unbelievable, and you're really such a tzaddik, and, I just went this, it's too much. It's too much. Even if they're sincere, it starts to sound insincere. The way to do it is to say one or two lines that are that bring across the message as effectively as possible. So I may have brought some of these examples in the past. You'll forgive me. Sometimes I see a kid davening with their father in shul, a little kid, and they're really davening very nicely. And I go over to the father in front of the kid and I go, Kol Kavod, I was inspired by your child's davening. I have to tell you, whatever you're doing the right thing, because Kol Kavod, it was such a beautiful davening. That's it. Kid feels like $1 million. He only feels like $1 million, I'm waiting online before Yontif in the supermarket. It is a madhouse. Everybody's screaming and yelling and terrible. And the checkout lady is really on edge. And I get up there and I say, Kol Kavod, what a difficult job you have over here. But you should know, you're not just working. You're doing a tremendous chesed, helping people make Yontif, and you should appreciate that. Kol Kavod, thank you so much. That's it. They feel like $1 million, It doesn't cost you anything, And, somebody, speaks and you go afterwards and say, wow, that was so powerful. I really, really gained tremendously from that. Shkoyach. You eat over somebody's house and you say, wow, what a meal. Look at all the different things, and point out one or two dishes and you say, this was unbelievable and this was terrific. I was like, I had such a great time, It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. Don't overdo it. That's my advice. Benny Malik. Why was Elazar Ben Horkenis just put in Cherem and not Chayev Misa as a Zakein Mamre? Well, that's an easy one. It was after the Beis HaMikdash and there was no Misa given out at that time. So all they could do was put him into Cherem. Even if he was, quote unquote, a Zakein Mamre, you're only a Zakein Mamre if you actually paskin the case. So Mistama, Elazar Ben Horkenis wasn't going around mattering people's ovens. He just held al pi halacha that it would be taha if you did it this way. But in order to be a Zakein Mamre, you have to actually do it. There's no evidence that he actually paskin the case. But even if he did, there was no misa at that point. It had been mevutal 40 years before by the Churban by Sheni. By Anonymous, what's the point of Anavah? Why not just try not to have Ga'avah? This is such a brilliant question. By which you could tell, of course, that it's my question. Yeah, that's how I know it's a brilliant question. The Mesilas Yesharim in Perek Yud Aleph goes through the four primary midos that he says you have to be mitakein. Ga'avah, Kaas, Kina, and Taiva. And he goes through them. And he goes through Ga'avah and he says, Yesh geya acha, yesh od geya, and how you have to work to remove every shemetz of Ga'avah from you. And after he finishes his entire discussion on Ga'avah, he says, and obviously we haven't reached the level of Anavah which is one of the highest levels. It comes at the end of Mesilas Yesharim, and we'll get there eventually. Right? Because after Nikias, he then has to go through Precious and Tara and Chasidus until he gets to Anavah. And I always wondered, how could you have no Ga'avah and not be an Anav? So the best answer I can give, as I understand it, is the following. Ga'avah, as the Mesilas Yesharim describes it, is someone who feels that he is worthwhile simply because he exists. A participation award, right? Either because he thinks he's good looking, or he thinks he's good at sports, or he's smart, or he's rich, or he comes from a chashuv family, whatever it is, I think I am a superior person because of that. That is called Ga'avah. And so if I remove all of that, then I don't look at myself as somebody special. Anavah is a different level. Anavah is where I recognize that I am lacking. Not just that I'm not somebody special, but I am lacking. As the Mesilas Yesharim says, either because of the things I've done wrong, either because of my limitations, or just because I'm a human being. Every human being, by definition, is chaser. And therefore, the more I integrate into myself the fact that I am chaser, I am lacking, I'm not, So that's how I understand it. That Ga'avah is thinking you are superior, and not having Ga'avah means you don't. And another means that I look at myself and I see all of my lackings and where I'm. So one is a positive and one is a negative. That's how I understood it. And that's it for this time. Want to find out more about the shiur? You can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. Sign up for one of my online shiurim, Daf Yomi, Tefillah. People every now and then sign up for the Tefillah shiur again. Mesilas Yesharim, and like I mentioned, there's been some suggestions that we start a Pirkei Avos shiur. If you're interested, please reach out. If we have enough people, then we'll do that. You can make a comment. You can send an email. You could sponsor an episode. You could sponsor a question and answer. You could sponsor Parsha in 5, and that's it for now. Until next time, I am Rabbi Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.